You're listening to The Other 50%, a herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. This is the podcast where I talk to successful women in entertainment and hear their stories. For this episode, I got to speak with Chelsea Steiner. Chelsea is a writer, director, and is producing a web series called Thank You, Come Again. Now here's the disclaimer. Chelsea's day job is at the Pleasure Chest in Hollywood, and she worked at a talent agency. So there is some explicit language here in both of those contexts, so this episode is not for children, nor is it suitable for work. We talk fairly explicitly about sex and gender and diversity, so let's all just be super mature. And it is really interesting in every other way, so trust me and stick with it. Just listen with your headphones on. I will admit I was nervous to do this interview, and I was pleasantly surprised. You can find us at theother50%.com for added features, photos, show notes, and the merchandise. And you can listen on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Podbay, and now on Spotify and iHeartRadio. Please subscribe and leave a review wherever it is that you listen. And since podcasting is a word-of-mouth enterprise, please tell all of your friends. Okay, here's Chelsea. What do you do?
Hi, I am a screenwriter and a director. But my day job is I work as a social media manager at the Pleasure Chest in West Hollywood. I run all of the social media accounts. We have stores in LA, New York, and Chicago, as well as an online store. And I do all of our social media, and I also do any copywriting, copy editing that needs to be done.
Okay, so if anybody doesn't know what that store is.
It's an upscale erotic boutique. So it's basically a store for sex toys and for sex accessories. And all that good stuff.
Sex accessories.
And I'm also a sex educator at the store.
And a filmmaker.
Yes.
Okay, go back to the beginning. What did you want to do when you were a kid?
You know, when I was a kid, I was that typical kid who either wanted to study dinosaurs or wanted to be an astronaut. I always had those like little kid career aspirations.
Yeah, a vet.
Oh, yeah. And actually, when I was in high school, I did want to pursue being a vet. I worked at a veterinary clinic, but for me, I'm a humanities girl, so the idea of all that math and science, I was just like, ugh, no thanks to 4 years of that.
Yeah.
And then growing up, I always loved film and television. I had a mother, I was raised by a single mom, and she loved film, and every weekend, you know, growing up in New Orleans, it is hot, 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 very humid, and literally just to beat the heat, we would spend every weekend at the movies. And that really made me and my sister kind of fall in love with film and start thinking about, you know, could we even work in film? What would that even look like? What would those jobs be?
How do you even get there?
Exactly. Especially from New Orleans, it just seemed kind of
a billion miles away.
Yeah, exactly.
So did you go to college for film?
Yes and no. I went to Stanford, and at the time I was there, they didn't have a film major yet.
Do they have one now? Because everybody says that.
Yeah, they have one now.
Okay.
I think they started it in like 2007.
This is how now we're going to age people, before or after Stanford's film major.
Yeah, I think it literally started the year that I left. So I got as close as I could. I was a communications major, and I did with kind of a focus on media, which I actually really loved. I love communications theory, and I found the whole thing fascinating, and I minored in poetry. For the money.
Oh, no, just for the money and the fame. That's great. So then, did you move down here when you graduated?
Yes. So while I was in college, I read The Mailroom. And once I read that, I was like, ooh, this is what I want to do. I want to be an agent. So I came down here. When I was in college, I interned at ICM.
How was that?
It was intense.
Was it swimming with sharks?
It was very swimming with sharks. But I kind of went into it, and I feel like I was the only person working there who wasn't someone's niece or someone's kid. I was just
the only non-nepotism hire.
Exactly. I think they just saw, ooh, Stanford, and were just like, let's bring her in.
Yeah.
And I worked for a very aggro, very swimming with shark style agent who was terrible to everyone except me. For some reason, he just really loved me, and we had a great working relationship.
In general, stories we've heard about agencies being horrible, basically true?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely.
Did you experience any specific gender-based nonsense?
I mean, people are always trying to push your buttons, and I do think it's such a boys' club. There is a sense of like, well, are you cool enough? Can you hang with the boys? Can you deal?
Can you take it?
Can you take it? Exactly. And there would be those kinds of things, and I was pretty unfazed. I mean, I grew up, for me, my philosophy around it was always, I grew up on a construction site because my mom's a contractor. So I grew up on construction sites doing hard physical labor with, you know, a bunch of guys. Right. So there was kind of nothing that could shock me. And there was kind of
you learned
nothing...
how to roll with it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I bet deflect it.
Yes. And I went in consciously being like, I'm already, you know, kind of a tomboy. I'm not a girly girl. So I was like, I'm going to really work the little sister angle and be the kind of kid that someone wants to take under their wing and actively try not to be sexualized or to be treated that way. And because I'm a nerdy girl, I kind of just leaned into that and tried to kind of foster that. It also helped that I looked very young when I was in college, so I think people were just like, oh, she's just a kid. Like, it was a very, no one tried to harass me, but I could see people doing it all around me.
Yeah.
And people kind of pushing buttons.
And interesting you went into it with that strategy.
Yeah, it was always something, because I saw the way that men treated women.
Right.
And I was like, this can go one of two ways. You're either the kind of little sister who people kind of paternalize, who people want to protect, or you're the sex object. And I was like, I'm going to take the little sister route, because that seems the safer bet.
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating to me, and I think it's totally true. And I think this goes on the list of things men don't have to think about or worry about when they take a job, of what version of femininity am I going to embody as a strategy to get through this?
Oh, yeah, and I was trying to explain this to my husband the other day, but I was like, being a woman involves a million different micro calculations every second that we don't even think of anymore. It's these constant tiny adjustments that you make as a woman to make yourself more quote-unquote palatable, or to protect yourself, or to kind of prevent uncomfortable situations from happening.
Yeah, I was having this conversation last night with a guy, and we were talking about coffee names and why women give different coffee names. And for me, it was always because they can't spell any name ever, so I give them Lola. Yeah. But he knew someone who never gave a real name just out of safety.
Oh, sure. And I mean, I think if you ask any woman growing up, she has her fake name in her back pocket if a creepy guy asks her what her name is.
And her fake number.
Every woman has the fake name and the fake number. I think if you asked men, no guys have their fake name and maybe their fake number if they're players, but that doesn't exist for men.
Have you seen that new phone number? You can give a guy a phone number, and when they text it, it'll text back, you got this number because you made a woman feel uncomfortable and unsafe. Knock it off.
I have heard of that. I don't have like the quickness to just have that number memorized or on a card.
I know, we should all learn it.
I know. I feel like I always, someone asks me for my number, I mean, now that I'm older, I'm in my 30s, I can just be like, no.
Well, and you're married, right?
And I'm married, so that's an easy enough, like, sorry, I'm married.
Yeah.
But when I was younger, I would just give a fake number or just change a couple of digits on my own phone number.
We used to say, oh, I come here all the time, I'll see you next week.
Yeah. But it's these constant kind of micro calculations.
Yeah.
And even just sitting on a desk, if you're listening on an agent's calls, you're hearing them talking horrible shit and saying disgusting things, and you just have to let it go, let it roll off your back.
Do you think that's going to change in the current hullabaloo?
I hope so. I hope that this is a watershed moment where people just don't give a shit anymore and start coming out and calling out everyone. You see it kind of starting this domino effect. Now more and more names are being named, and I hope it does something permanent. I mean, I just saw a couple of agents got fired last week over sexual harassment, some of whom I know personally, and it's just like, oh yeah, that sounds about right. There is something about agencies that is a hyper-sexualized atmosphere in a very weird way. Even in the mailroom, like once I graduated college, I went to work for ICM and I started in the mailroom in the agent trainee program, and you work your way up. But even in the mailroom, it was just like and it wasn't a threatening feeling, it was kind of like in war. Coming up with someone in the mailroom is like you're in the trenches. So it's like we're all in this together.
They're your war buddies.
They're your war buddies, exactly. And you can say disgusting things to your war buddies that you wouldn't necessarily say to your friend from Temple. So it was a very kind of like randy atmosphere and culture, even to the point where we were literally playing grab ass in the mailroom. And looking back, I was like, why did we do that? Even the girls did it. And it was all fun and games and laughing and grabbing asses. But looking back, I'm like, other jobs don't do that.
No, and when you're young and coming into it, you don't know. You think, oh, this is the culture. This is the business I want to be in. Let me figure it out.
Yeah. And while I was working there, I noticed, that was a huge part of the culture. But you would also see how female agents would behave. You would see the women at the top. I mean, it varied from agent to agent, but I would see this trend of women kind of taking the worst qualities of the male agents and kind of adopting them.
In order to make it.
In order to make it, and in order to be tough, and in order to, I mean, the hardest nails female agents were scarier than the male agents, to me, by far. Like, I would much rather work for a male boss, because to me, there wasn't, if a guy was yelling at me, I just thought it was kind of silly. Like, I never...
Like, dude, get it together.
Exactly. I never took it seriously, whereas...
Hey, Ari.
Exactly. Like, I could always kind of laugh it off in a way that I couldn't if a woman was disappointed with me. And maybe that's just my own mommy issues. I don't know. But something about disappointing a woman was just crushing. Like, I never cried on men's desks, but I cried on women's desks all the time. Not in front of them. I'd wait till they leave, close the office door, and then cry. But I don't know.
That it's a job where you cry at your desk.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's emotional abuse. Like, it is as bad as they talk about it. And what's crazy is we live in this industry that's just, you accept it. Because there's so many people that want to work in it. And everyone wants to work in show business. So you're just like...
Yeah, there's someone right behind you.
Exactly. So it's part of the suck it up. And especially with an agency job, you learn so much. Like, I use what I learned at the agency all the time. I always tell people, don't go to film school. If you want to work in the film business, the real film grad school is working at an agency, because you learn how everything works. You learn how every aspect of the business kind of works together and how everything comes together and functions.
And it's trial by fire.
Exactly.
We could do without that part of it.
Yeah.
So how long did you stay there?
Once I graduated and I started working there, I was there for about a year and a half.
Did you think, never mind, I don't want to be an agent?
Pretty much, yeah. I looked around at all the agents and I was like, wow, no one's happy. Even the people who are very successful are miserable and hate their lives.
And abusive. Not that they're all abusive. I don't know every agent, just as a blanket statement. Don't sue me.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is just an abusive atmosphere. And I got into it because I like working with people, and I thought it would be fun and challenging to work with actors and to work with writers and directors. But the agent side of it, I think looking back, what I was more interested in doing was management. But at the time, I didn't know that was more about career guiding, and agencies were more about closing deals and cutthroat. And yeah, so I just kind of, after about a year and a half there, I was working for an agent who I will not name because I don't want to get sued. But he wanted to fire me because I didn't drive stick shift.
What?
Well, he had two assistants. I was his second assistant. And the second assistant's job is basically to go get his car washed, and you drove a stick, and I didn't drive a stick. So that, combined with the fact that I was a woman, he didn't want me on his desk because he wanted to just talk like... He wanted to have that locker room talk,
right?
And he didn't want to have to worry about censoring himself.
So he wanted to work
on
in
the
a
phone.
Frat house.
Oh yeah. He wanted to talk about the hot piece of ass he got last night, or someone else's pussy, or whatever. And I told him and he told me as much when I applied for the job. And I told him, I grew up on a construction site. There's nothing you can say
I can
that
handle
would shock
you,
me.
buddy.
I can handle you, and I could, but he just kind of hired me begrudgingly, and then was never comfortable having a woman on his desk.
But mostly it was about the stick shift.
Yeah, it was definitely a stick shift. But also I was second assistant, so I was doing all the personal errands,
Ew.
Yeah, like getting the kids' soccer uniforms, that kind of personal aspect of stuff. And, I had been on like one or two desks previously in different departments, and I just realized that agency life wasn't for me. So I started kind of looking for an exit, and I decided to get into casting. So from there, I went and worked for a casting agency.
As an assistant?
Yes.
What kind of casting?
Film and TV. And this is another situation where I will not be naming names because they're pretty famous. But I went to work for a company run by a woman, and I was really excited because I loved the projects that she did, and she seemed really fascinating. And it started out good, but then quickly kind of declined into a Devil Wears Prada working environment situation. And I found, I was hired as a casting assistant, and then I got along really great with her kids. So I kind of turned into the nanny.
That's not what you signed up for.
Exactly. And again, I was her assistant, so I was happy to do what needed to be done.
Help in whatever way.
Exactly. And I was like, I know that this business is picking up dry cleaning and helping with people's kids. So I was fine with that, but it got to a point where I was just doing that and not being treated very well. And again, being paid nothing. Mm-hmm. Both of these jobs, they don't pay you anything. I was living in my mom's garage throughout this whole portion of my career because I couldn't afford to pay rent. And I think there's so many things to unpack with this, but the people that get these jobs, there's a reason that everyone's nieces and nephews are working at these jobs, working at these companies, because you can't survive on an agency salary if you don't have help, if you don't come from a family with money.
It is kind of a privileged position to have internships and entry-level jobs.
Oh, yeah, it's absolutely a privileged position. So that's part and parcel of why there's no diversity in agencies, why there's no diversity in this industry, because it's all rich white people hiring their kids and nephews and friends of friends. And that's how you get zero diversity. And that's how you get 99 shows with a white male lead and maybe one with a woman.
Well, there's so many different angles to attack this at. What a wonderful opportunity.
I know. So I was really working, I was overworked and underpaid as a casting assistant. And then
you weren't learning anything at this point if you were just driving the kids around.
Yeah, exactly. I was just driving kids around and kind of like, taping auditions. And I got sick, and I got really sick. And I didn't want to take off work because I knew it would be an issue. So I just kept working, figuring it was just like a cold or the flu, and I would power through it. I mean, taking a sick day at an agency is like, you have to be hit by a car, you have to be in the hospital. The idea of taking a sick day is just frowned upon.
Oh, anywhere in the industry.
Oh, yeah. I wanted to power through, and it turned out that I had mono. And I went to the doctor, and he said, your spleen is enlarged. Your spleen will explode if you keep working. And I was like, but I have to. Of course, when you're in your early 20s, you're like, but it's my job. I have to keep working. So he was like, no, you need to be on bed rest for at least like 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. So I called my boss. And when I called my boss to tell her that I was sick and I needed bed rest, she decided at that moment that it wasn't working out and that she would fire me. So which now I've realized is illegal. And I probably could have sued for that, but to what end? To be blackballed from the industry over a case of mono?
Yeah, you see the problem.
Yeah, I just remember, I have a very vivid memory of like running a fever, being on my mom's couch with like the phone in my hand with my boss yelling at me. And my mom, who was taking care of me, came over and took the phone out of my hand and started yelling at my boss. Because she was an angry Jewish mother.
She was not having it.
She was not having it. Yeah, so I was on the couch for the better part of a month, and I couldn't do anything because I was sick. It took me a long time to recover, and, then I was...
That little illness may be telling you something.
Yeah. So I was just like, oh, okay. Actually, what's funny is I feel like big moments in my life have always been preceded by bad illnesses.
Okay, so that's your hint?
It is.
Something needs to change?
Yeah, that's my pattern. So once I recovered, I started looking for other jobs, and I was like, oh, maybe I want to work in casting again or work in development. And I was kind of at that place where I was applying for everything. I mean, I think with this, everything's so competitive, you just have to apply for every possible job. Mm-hmm. I mean, even when I was looking for internships, I must have applied to like 60 different internships and got maybe like 5 responses.
Oh, it is crazy.
Yeah. So it's just, it's a crapshoot. You just have to put as much out there as possible.
So what'd you do?
Well, I applied to a bunch of different places. I didn't really find something that made sense for me at the time. And I was just kind of living in my mom's garage, not really finding good work. And at the same time, my sister, who was also in LA, was a screenwriter. And she went to Columbia to study film. She came out here, went to USC, got her MFA in screenwriting. She had a manager, and she was writing and hustling and trying to start her career. And she had a book adaptation that a producer had wanted her to take a crack at. And I was, unemployed and just hanging out. And she was, I'm having a lot of trouble with this book project. And I was like, well, let's just talk it out. And at the time, it had never occurred to me to be a writer even despite writing my entire life and doing slam poetry in college.
Yeah, that's easy. That's not a thing.
Yeah, I mean, and for me, it's that kind of thing in families where it was like, oh, that's my sister's thing. I want to do my own thing.
Yeah, you couldn't possibly have the same genes.
Yeah. So, like, despite writing in every medium throughout my entire life, it never occurred to me to be like, oh, I want to be a writer. And so we just started spitballing ideas, and we started writing together, and it just naturally progressed into this really good writing partnership.
I love that.
Yeah, and so we both brought, like, kind of different things to the table. She had the training behind it. She's really great with kind of structure and plot, and I'm really strong with character and jokes and dialogue. So we kind of settled into this, we started writing together, and then we wrote a couple of scripts, and then I think it was our third or fourth script that we wrote together was called Tough Cookies. It was about kind of a Bad News Bears, but set in the world of Girl Scouts, and it's kind of a family comedy about, like, a deadbeat dad who has to take over his delinquent kids' Girl Scout troop.
Yeah.
So it was very School of Rock meets...
I'm all in on this pitch. What happened?
Yeah. So it was School of Rock meets Troop Beverly Hills, which is one of my favorite movies. And we got an agent off that script, and then we sold it to Walden Media. And that got us into the Guild.
Mazel tov.
Legitimized us. Yeah, so that was in 2008, I want to say.
Now, did this get made?
No.
Or did it become The Boss?
Oh, I mean, I wish. Love some of that boss money. But, it got stuck in development hell, as things often do. We wrote it as a very sharp kind. It was definitely a PG-13 R movie, and I know that they hired someone to rewrite it, to soften it up, but like every other script, it just kind of languished. But it was enough to get us attention and to...
Success.
Exactly. And it was success, and we made money.
And what a great idea.
Yeah. We just kind of landed on this thing, and then we started writing in earnest, and writing became our full-time jobs. Mm-hmm. And so you know how it is in this business. It's feast or famine. So we would sell stuff. We ended up working with the Disney Channel. We wrote 2 movies for them that didn't end up getting produced. We sold a project to NBC Universal. And we just started kind of getting that trickle in of work.
This is the secret of the life of writers that you don't realize when you're not in the business, is you can write and sell all kinds of things and none of them ever show up on
Oh yeah, and even when I was in college and I would meet people who were writers, and they would be, you can make a great living as a writer and never have anything made.
Yeah.
I mean, getting stuff made is great.
And that's a legit career.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, you consider 90% of the scripts that sell just don't get made.
Yeah.
So it's already, it's such a narrow window to actually get something produced. But it was great, and then we took meetings all around town, and we were developing projects with producers and working with other producers on stuff and, just kind of building our writing career. So we were doing that for several years. But, in this business, it's feast or famine. Mm-hmm. So you could sell something and have a big chunk of money and then not sell something for the next 2 years.
Yeah, the trick is not to immediately adjust your lifestyle as if you're getting that paycheck every day.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a matter of managing your money, but eventually between managing your money and if you don't make a certain amount of money, you don't get your Writers Guild health insurance. Mm-hmm. So as our careers progressed, we were making less money, and once you make less money, you have to pick up additional work. So we both started teaching. My sister still teaches. She's a community college film studies professor, and I was tutoring SATs. I was mostly in the tutoring kids realm, and then SAT prep, all that kind of stuff. So I was...
Okay, can you come by later when my kids get home from school?
Oh, I'm like the SAT expert. I'm an SAT wizard. But, I was doing that for a while, and then I kind of, you reach a point where the need for money outweighs, you basically have to take on a full-time job. And I was doing a bunch of different freelance gigs, and it was wearing me out, and I kind of was having trouble maintaining all of these freelance commitments. And, this is a business that runs on free work. And everyone expects writers to do treatments for free, to do multiple drafts for free. And even if we have stuff under option or set up, and we have 2 features under option with 2 different studios right now, it's still not enough money to live on.
Right.
And it's a situation where they keep squeezing endless rewrites and redrafts out of you to keep you on the hook with the promise of an option.
So you can't really say no.
Exactly. It puts writers in an impossible situation. And I wish that the WGA would do something about it, that there would be sort of rules or limits in place. And I know that there are rules in place, but they don't get taken seriously. They're never enforced. And what are you going to do? Say no? 50 people behind you have a script that they want to sell just as badly. So it puts you, I mean, I do think that writers, ironically, everything starts with the writer. There's no movie without a script.
Right.
But writers are consistently the most powerless people in these exchanges and in these relationships.
Yeah, isn't that weird?
It is. We're at the bottom of the totem pole, and we're the genesis.
You're creating it.
Yeah. And if you have an agent or a manager, they'll tell you basically, shut up and do the free work if you want to make money. So there's no one's interested in fairness. No one's interested in changing the system.
So did you have to go get a JOB?
Yeah, so that's what happened. My sister and I, we still have our feature work in development. And over the past 8, almost 10 years now, we've written like about 15, 16 feature films. We've written multiple pilots. We've written TV movies. So we've amassed a catalog of work.
Yeah.
And then we both decided, like most screenwriters, the real money's in television now. Mm-hmm. Film market's getting smaller and smaller. I mean, I think if we tried to sell Tough Cookies today, I don't think it would sell. Because even in the space between, 2007, 2008, and today, they're not really making movies that aren't franchises, that aren't tentpoles. There's just kind of no
that
space.
Budget level has kind of disappeared.
Yeah, and that whole budget level. And, I mean, I do think there's just whole genres of film that we don't see anymore. Like, when I was growing up, there were adult movies like family dramas, legal thrillers, movies that were just about people talking.
Right.
That you
And Bad News Bears.
And Bad News Bears. But there were movies that you just, like, never see today anymore. If you go to any movie theater right now, every poster is going to be a comic book or a franchise film. And studios are making less movies, or they're doing, like, super micro-budget movies. But no one's making those kind of mid-range family
10 to
films
20.
anymore. Yeah, that kind of has dried up. But yeah, it's a bummer because I like to watch those kinds of movies. But so we had both decided we want to get into TV because that's where all the great content is right now. That's where all the work is.
Isn't it great?
Oh, it's amazing. You
can't even keep up with everything you want to watch.
It's impossible. There's just too many shows, and they're all, like, excellent with, like, incredible pedigrees and casts, and they're interesting and they're niche. I mean, it's just such a rich world to play in, and there's so many options. There's so many channels, and everyone wants original content for a streaming platform or for a channel. So we decided we had kind of divergent interests in TV. She wanted to do, like, historical dramas, Downton Abbey type shows, which I love to watch, but I didn't really want to write.
Yeah.
And I wanted to write more comedies. And I wanted to work in comedies, and I wanted to work, I'm a bit of a genre nerd, so I wanted to work in, like, sci-fi and horror, which she couldn't care less about. So we still maintain our film projects and our film work together, but we're on separate paths TV-wise. But in the meantime, I needed a day job because I didn't have health insurance and I didn't have any money coming in. I knew that I wanted something that was flexible hours, that I could still be able to write when I was doing it, something that wasn't soul-destroying. I spent enough time
That's a lot of tough criteria.
Oh, yeah.
Flexible hours and not soul-destroying.
I know. And I kind of bounced around. I did a lot of tutoring, but I was just like, it's a lot of piecemeal kind of contract work, and I wanted something that was a 9 to 5-ish thing that I could depend on and not have to have panic attacks about money.
Yeah.
So I do comedy. I came up doing, like, UCB improv stuff, and do some stand-up, and I'm in a Women in Comedy Facebook group. I'm in a few different ones, actually. And someone had posted, there's this job opening at the Pleasure Chest. They need a social media manager and a copywriter. And in between that time that I had been writing, I'd also been blogging for different kind of pop culture websites and for different media outlets. I'm bisexual, so I wrote a lot for queer women's websites, like After Ellen and Autostraddle, and a couple others, doing TV recaps or just kind of writing think pieces or just articles about kind of, this week in pop culture, gay news. I had a tiny social media following, but I had a whole resume of online writing and blogging.
Yeah.
And part of this social media job was managing social media accounts. And I was like, well, I can do that. I know how to use Twitter. I know how to use Facebook. And they needed someone who could write. And I was like, well, I know I can write. And I was like, I'd been to the Pleasure Chest. I knew what it was. And I grew up in a very sex-positive household. My mom is liberal hippie. She went to Woodstock. So it was always a very open, and she was always very open and honest with us about sex stuff, about the birds and the bees, and about safe sex. And it was never a taboo thing. Like, she was always just an open book with us. So I didn't grow up with any, like, we don't talk about that kind of mentality. It was always just, we can talk about anything.
That's practically un-American.
I know. It's very unusual. And because I had that upbringing, you know, I was the person in college who was lecturing my friends about using condoms.
Right, you were giving the safe sex talk.
Oh, yeah, with no one paying me, just talking to and realizing that my friends were completely ignorant about really important stuff and their own sexual health. So I was the one who was like, you had unprotected sex last night? Let's go get you some Plan B. Like, you're not on birth control? Let's get you on birth control. So
Let's sort you out.
Yeah, so I was the person for my group of friends who was like, let's, like, just take care of yourself. Like, just the basic maintenance of your own body and being aware of your own body and practicing safe sex.
Okay, now this is what happens when we have no sex ed in school.
Exactly.
It doesn't stop everybody from having sex.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the idea that having sex ed in schools somehow encourages teens to have more sex. It's like, newsflash, teens have been having sex since the dawn of time. Nothing is going to stop them from rubbing up against each other. It's going to happen. And it was wild to me because, you know, I'm at Stanford University, arguably one of the top schools in the country.
Filled with smart people.
Filled with brilliant kids building rocket ships in their dorm rooms. Like, the really smart people who don't know anything about sex or about safe sex or about personal safety. And to me, that was such a disconnect. But of course,
it's a tragedy is what that is.
Oh yeah, it's terrible. And never mind pleasure-based sexual education. Never mind talking about what you like in bed or having a good sexual experience. You know,
we really don't talk about.
Yeah. We barely get the put a condom on a banana talk.
Right.
So for me, I was always like, this is important. People should know this. Women need to be aware of how to protect themselves. So that was always kind of my pet cause in college. You know, just making sure that none of my friends got pregnant and make sure that everyone was just being safe.
Yeah.
Even just going to parties and using the buddy system and making sure no one got drunk and left behind. All of that you have to be cognizant of. So I applied for this job kind of on a whim because I was like, I'm not going to get this. Like, I don't have any experience in the adult industry. You know, I haven't worked in social media. I'm on social media and I blog. So I applied as...
But, you know, no one has 15 years of experience in social media.
Yeah, and something that's been around for like 8 years max. So I kind of applied on a whim, and I was like, oh, this is another job that I won't get a call back for. And they had, part of it was a writing sample, so I sent in a writing sample, and they brought me in for an interview, and they hired me. And I was like, oh, wow, this is crazy. And they were like, the hours are flexible. And the big seller was I could bring my dog into the office.
Fantastic.
And I was like, oh my God, this is great. So I took the job. My mom was really supportive.
It's so funny that you were so surprised because I think there were not a million people applying for that job.
They had a lot of people apply and a lot of people within the sex ed industry. And I kind of came into it not really knowing anything about, like, I knew that sex toys existed. I'd been to the store, but I didn't know that there's a big online community of sex toy reviewers and sex education bloggers.
All right,
that
so it shows you how much I don't know anything about this.
But I didn't know any of this going into it.
Yeah.
I kind of went in and got hired like pretty much solely off the basis of my writing. You kind of, as a writer, you forget because so many people expect you to do it for free and it's not valued. You forget that a lot of people can't write.
Yeah.
So you're like, oh, well, I can easily write a paragraph about this product and have it be grammatically correct and have it make sense and have it have a flow to it. And there's a lot of people that can't do that. Like, writing really is a skill that you cultivate or that you develop. And you forget that because to me, I've always...
Because it's easy.
Because it's easy.
Yeah.
I mean, or it comes naturally to you, or it's like... I mean, I feel like any screenwriter, if you were just like, you know, write copy for an ad or they would be like, oh, and they'd produce it without thinking too much about it. But for a lot of people, it's really hard. That is a skill set. And so I started working at this job, and that was about like a little over 2 years ago. And so that's been my day job. And I write evenings, weekends.
So then sitting at that job and watching what went on, were you thinking, this is a show that writes itself?
Oh, 100%. I mean, once I started, I was like, this is by far the most fun place I've ever worked. I work out of the West Hollywood store location, and it's a company that's run by queer people. It's a company where most of the employees are women, or they're non-binary, or they're trans. It's the most diverse, inclusive place I've ever worked. It's the most welcoming place I've ever worked. I do think that this job draws an individual that is avant-garde, or that is not your typical kind of person. It definitely brings out the misfit aspect of people. And it brings out people who are awkward, who are outcasts in their regular life, who want a job where they can do something more adventurous and more exciting. And what I also
people who may not be working an office job.
Exactly. And for someone, if you're someone that's trans, or if you present in a quote-unquote non-traditional way, you get harassed at other jobs.
Right, it's a safe
or
place.
you don't get hired. And it's a really safe place to work if you're gay, if you're trans, if you're anything outside of what society considers quote-unquote normal. It's a safe space to work. And it's a space where you can work and not worry about what my coworkers say. Will I be harassed?
I have to take out all my piercings.
Exactly. So it's a place where you can go and have neck tattoos and have piercings and have a shaved head with a purple mohawk. And it's a place where you can go and be an individual. And it's a very welcoming for that. So I loved kind of the diversity and the inclusivity of it. It's just a fun, silly place to work because of the nature of what you're working with. There's dildos everywhere. It's
hard to be too serious.
It's hard to be too serious. It's easy to laugh. Everyone kind of has a sense of humor about everything. And what I noticed is that everyone who works there is really creative. And I do think part of that is living in LA, but everyone that I work with, they are actors, they're singers, they're drag performers, they're performance artists, they're directors, they're writers. Everyone is really creative. And just very kind of warm and open and non-judgmental. And of course, the job skews extremely liberal as you can get. It's pretty
imagine.
It's self-selecting. I mean, no one who would, vote for Trump would want to come work at a West Hollywood sex shop. So you have this really fascinating, fun group of really diverse, inclusive people. And so once I started working there and getting to know the people that I worked with, I was like, ugh, this is a show.
Yeah.
So I wrote a half-hour pilot that I was shopping around, but it's a tough sell because of the,
Because where are you going to air it?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a NBC show. It's not a network show.
It is not suitable for work.
Exactly. So it's, it would be a cable show or maybe an FX show. It has to be a more adult, later night kind of show.
Yeah.
So I got some interest. I basically got the sense people liked the writing, but just the topic was kind of a non-starter.
Well, the visual I found unnerving. I watched the trailer, which I thought was funny and interesting, but there's so many dildos on the screen. It's a little bit, for me, it was jarring. I was like, I hope my kids can't walk in the room right now. I don't know where you're going to watch it.
Yeah, and for a lot of people, the second they see a dick on screen, they're just like, nope, I'm done.
Yeah.
But that's the environment. So I was like, well, if I can't make this happen as a pilot, I'm just going to shoot it myself as a web series. And
it's a hilarious premise.
Yeah, and it's a premise that I haven't seen before that I think would be really fun. And people film in the store all the time. We've had every major reality show come in and do an episode at the store. The Kardashians have been there, the Real Housewives. So, I mean, you can build a whole narrative around, what Kardashian wants to buy a sex toy or wants to learn something new. So we've been on Shahs of Sunset, Better Things, the Pamela Adlon show, shot a scene there. But people are constantly filming in the store because it's a great set piece. And the store, if you've never been, is not that cliche idea of frosted windows, brown paper bags, peep shows in the back.
Shameful, secretive.
Exactly. It's more like an Urban Outfitters. And when people walk in, it's actually a very luxurious, brightly lit, elegant shopping space.
Yeah, that's not what I pictured at all.
Yeah, I mean, you should come by and check it out. You'd be surprised. But it's a very upscale, and the whole industry, it's an industry that was built on cheap toys and novelty items. But now you have high-tech companies building these really high-tech advanced toys that wouldn't look out of place at an Apple store. So there's technology and there's luxury in the sex toy market now, and it's just getting bigger. It's a billion-dollar industry. And you're getting really elegant, smartly designed products that's not just it's a giant jelly penis. It's, a very advanced piece of machinery. So it's become kind of a luxury thing now. And now that sex toys are more in the conversation, people are talking about it, they're showing it on TV shows, more people are talking about sex, it's becoming more socially acceptable. I mean, if you go on any women's magazine website, you go to Glamour, Cosmopolitan, Marie Claire, they'll all have a my favorite sex toys list, or if you go to Refinery 29 or any of those kind of online, even Goop with Gwyneth Paltrow has a whole section of sex toys and lubes and stuff like that.
So it's going mainstream.
It is. It's going very mainstream.
Issa Rae had a scene in Insecure where she was looking for batteries. So she took them out of her remote control. So yeah, all right.
Yeah,
all right.
so it's
out
everywhere.
there.
It's an Insecure. I mean, Broad City has had multiple storylines with sex toys and has released their own line of Broad City branded sex toys.
Seriously?
Yeah. Yeah. So
There's some merch.
Yeah, so there's merch that you can buy. And so I think it's really taking off. I mean, it all started with Sex and the City, with definitely the pioneer of just women talking about sex on TV was such an outrageous
Samantha
thing.
going to buy her massager.
Exactly. And the scene, I don't know if you remember the Rabbit episode, where Charlotte buys the Rabbit vibrator and then becomes addicted to it, can't leave her apartment. That was filmed at the Pleasure Chest in New York City, in the West Village. So to this day, the Sex and the City tour bus stops at the Pleasure Chest every day with a busload of tourists who want to go buy the Rabbit. So it kind of, once people started talking, and it's funny how this all comes full circle, because in college, I actually wrote my graduating thesis on Sex and the City and women talking about sexuality and pop culture and on TV. So it all kind of comes full circle.
And here you are.
And here I am. And what's funny is when I took this job and I started telling people I got this job, all of my friends were like, oh, that's so you. You're perfect for this. Which on the one hand, I was like, oh, good, I'm perfect for it. But on the other hand, I was like, oh, what does this say about me? But I'm hoping it's all...
You have to do a whole lot of self-reflection.
Yeah. And, and it's still that thing of telling your in-laws, this is what I do for a living. I don't know how...
It's a little awkward.
It's a little awkward. I don't know how much they understand or choose to understand about what I do, but I keep
Probably
it pretty
just enough
vague.
to keep them comfortable and keep it at bay.
Yeah, for most people, especially on my husband's side of the family, I'm a social media manager for an upscale retail company. And that's as far as I need to go. Most people don't have questions beyond that.
Yeah.
And it is a business. I mean, it's a legitimate business. I'm not working in a dark alleyway. I'm working at a brightly lit store that's very successful in a growing industry that's making a lot of money right now.
Have they seen your pilot?
Yes, I think so. I don't know, actually, because I've gotten some donations from family members, and I'm publicizing it on my social media, and everyone, my stepmother-in-law follows me on Facebook, so they all see it. I don't know how much they're choosing to pay attention
Let's
to
ask
it.
them. Caller, you're on line one. Let's see.
Great. It's my mother-in-law. Hi, Suze. But I mean, they've been supportive. It's a very different scene with them versus my own family. I'm married.
Your mom's holding the boom mic.
Oh, yeah. My mom is like, this is great. My mom is on board. And my husband's family is very supportive, but they live in Atlanta. They're Southern.
We don't know what you people are doing out there in California.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like they don't really understand. I mean, I feel like most people outside of the industry don't know, that there's different jobs in the industry, that you can make a living. Everyone has this idea of what Hollywood is.
Yeah.
But they're very supportive. And everyone that I've kind of shown the project to has been really supportive about it. And people in the WGA have been really supportive, and in the Women's Committee, and
great.
in the LGBT committee that I'm on. One of the committee members, one of the writers, is acting in the series. He's a writer-actor, and he's just a really great guy.
He's like, I'm in.
Oh, yeah. He was just super excited about it.
That's great. So where are you now? You're doing a crowdfunding?
Yeah, so we're in our final week of crowdfunding. Crowdfunding ends November 12th.
Okay. I apologize already. This is coming out
Yeah,
after November 12th.
Which is fine.
We hope you all contributed.
But yeah, and so I think we'll probably do additional crowdfunding just because we haven't met our goal yet. So right now, I was actually just texting with my producer before walking in. We're talking about, what are additional avenues we want to go down in terms of fundraising, and trying to figure out, plus, how many people we can kind of find who will do it for free or who will do it on deferment. What's great about living in LA and kind of having your career here is you meet everyone. And so by the time you spend enough time here, a cinematographer and a sound guy. And
you can have a block party and come up with a film crew.
Oh, exactly. So it's very accessible. So it's going to be calling in a lot of favors. And trying to pull a lot of help from different avenues and kind of piecemealing it together. I mean, what's great is we can shoot in the store for free, and the store is already dressed as a set. It already
amazing.
looks Yeah, I mean, you can see from the trailer, it's a very dynamic place to film.
Yes, and it's such an original idea.
Yeah. So we're in talks about licensing the show for like a streaming network potentially, or for like a subscription-based network. So we have interest for it. It's just a matter of raising that principal money to shoot the pilot, which we're now doing as like kind of 5-minute webisodes.
Yeah, good. What kind of rating would you get?
I mean, with web series, you don't need a rating.
Well, that's good.
You can kind of do whatever you want depending on the platform that you're streaming on. And that's kind of its own separate issue. YouTube has kind of, I don't know if you've been following any of this, but YouTube's been coming under fire in an effort to kind of censor, to keep nudity and porn off of YouTube. They're censoring terms like trans, gay, bisexual, which...
So things get caught in the net.
Sure. And so there's a lot of people, I mean, a lot of stuff just for educational, for kids coming out, for vloggers who are detailing the progress of their transition. All of this content for queer folks is getting censored and lumped into porn. And so all of these content creators and all of these channel influencers are losing money and losing advertising. And there's been a bit of an uproar around it with YouTube to just be like, gay content doesn't equal pornographic content. Right. It's just gay people making content.
We need to have a cultural shift to a bit more of a mature perspective.
Oh, yeah.
On all these things.
And even over the weekend, Twitter had banned the search for the word bisexual. You couldn't search bisexual all weekend long.
Why?
Because some algorithm told them, oh, this equals porn, in an effort to keep, God forbid they do something about all the Nazis on Twitter.
Right.
Or about all the racist, hate sites, or the Russian bots for that matter. But by all means, let's try and keep bisexual people off Twitter. People are very upset about it, but it's this weird kind of control thing that everyone's figuring out.
And was it just for the weekend? And then did it loosen up?
Yeah, I think it loosened up because there was a big outcry and there was just what are you doing? And then someone, I think, went in and fixed it. But, this is content that people want and people need. And if you're a kid in the middle of nowhere, USA, and you're gay and you're the only gay kid in your town, the internet is your only resource.
You need
your
to find
only
community.
Refuge to find community. Yeah. So when you take that away, you don't have anything.
Right.
So it's critically important that these big media companies take these things seriously and figure out a way to let queer content providers put their content up without getting harassed, without getting shut down. Because we're putting up safe for work content. I mean, not my show. My show is dirty and has dildos and sex jokes in it. But there's a million other shows that are just shows by other teens just talking about their queer experiences and their lived experiences. And that shouldn't be censored. And it's discriminatory and it's messed up. And it shouldn't happen. So that's kind of been going on in social media channels for the past couple of years. This has kind of been an ongoing issue that I'm hoping will at some point come to a head or someone will do something about it.
I think it's a constant evolution as kind of the mainstream gets better understandings of these issues. It's one baby step at a time, but then you look back over 10 years and it's leaps and bounds.
Oh, yeah, and even just considering like how things were when I'm 33, and so looking at how things were when I was in high school versus when I was in college to younger kids today.
Totally different.
It's so different. I mean, kids are coming out so much earlier, which is amazing because they feel safe to do so because they see examples and they see representation, and people's minds change over the course of time. But even it's all happening very, very fast, and I think we're kind of moving at this breakneck speed, which is amazing for younger generations, but I definitely see older generations struggling with it and struggling with understanding concepts about gender and concepts about sexuality that they kind of there's no precedent for, there's no prior education for, there's been no groundwork laid.
It runs up against religion and beliefs and what they think is how the world is. It's hard.
Yeah, exactly. So it's tough, and there's a sense of like you have to meet people where they are and educate them in a way that doesn't scare them, that doesn't condescend to them, but trying to build a greater understanding of all of these issues. And that's partly what I want to do with my series. The series is full of queer characters and trans characters that are played by queer and trans actors, which to me was really important to have that representation.
Progress on all fronts.
Exactly. And I'm making a concerted effort to have the majority of people behind the scenes be queer, trans, or people of color. Because, even though we're a tiny little pissant web series, I think it's important to provide opportunities.
Yes.
And I think it's important to, I've always been a believer in a rising tide lifts all boats. So I want to give people the opportunity to make art and to do stuff and to participate.
And to get the work experience.
Exactly, because no one else is giving it to them. Like, you really have to do it yourself. And we see stuff changing. You know, people like Jill Soloway are changing the way that we do business. I had my mind blown the other day. I was reading an interview with her, and she was saying that the schedule of working on set, of the crazy hours, getting in so early, staying so late, working 14-hour days, was built around men who didn't want to go home to their wives and kids. And I was like, oh, and it didn't even occur to me. Like, as soon as she
Once you hear it, you're like, yeah,
I was like,
that makes sense.
I know. I was like, of course that's what it is. You know? So it's a matter of providing childcare for
just like
people
per
working on
diem was
sets.
paid in cash, so they didn't have to sit at home with their check.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's all these things kind of working against us. You have to keep your community in mind and value the people that you work with.
Yeah. Well, and I think enough people have done the financial modeling of if you add a couple of days on and you don't have the overtime, it's actually cheaper. So let's try to be civilized.
Yeah, it's cheaper. People are happier. It's more manageable for women with children.
You'll get better work.
Yeah, you get better work and you get higher employee satisfaction. It works out better for everyone.
Right.
You
don't
know?
have to kill people to make
Exactly.
television.
But also just there's so many things that we do in this business that should be unacceptable, that are unacceptable in other businesses. You know, your boss isn't allowed to scream at you. They're not allowed to go on tirades. We kind of tolerate all these angry, screaming man babies in this business who keep getting work, who keep getting hired, who keep kind of failing upwards. And then there's no air in the room left for everyone else.
It does feel like we are standing at the precipice, though, doesn't it?
I hope so. I really hope.
It better be.
That, and the evidence is incontrovertible. You know, you look at how well Wonder Woman did. You look at how well Get Out did.
Right.
You look at all of these successes, and then you see what isn't successful and what isn't working is these kind of testosterone-driven, bleak movies. The problem is the people in power are still old white men.
Well, and the data just came out. Gina Davis said yesterday on a panel, movies with female leads and directed by women make 16% more in the box office.
And even though that's fact, you could walk into any general meeting today with a producer or an agent, and they'll just be like, I don't know, no one wants to make women's movies.
It's so risky.
Yeah, I mean, I went out with a raunchy female comedy literally the weekend after Bridesmaids opened, and it was a smashing success. And I still got, people don't want to see women's movies. And I was like, really? It's like...
I got to go because I got to go see Bridesmaids again.
Exactly. So it's that kind of thing. And women aren't given the opportunities. Women don't get to fail. Women don't get to fuck up. You know, once you do, you're exiled from movie kingdom. Whereas any guy who does even passable work keeps getting hired, keeps getting
He'll get better.
work.
He'll get better.
Yeah, and I think that men are given leeway and leverage in this industry in a way that women, people of color, minorities just are not. You know, and I do think that's starting to change. I do think that...
Well, because we're all talking about it.
Yeah,
we're
all
all
talking
fluent
about it.
in this language of naming it.
Exactly, and that's why I'm hoping we are at the precipice of stuff really changing and stuff really happening. I mean, I hope that it does, because it's important. I mean, the fact that the ACLU had to get involved with the Directors Guild because it was so sexist, that really says something, and I think it speaks to the larger... I mean, we know that sexism doesn't just exist in the film industry. It's everywhere, everywhere all the time. But I'm glad that people are kind of putting film under a microscope and saying, this is really messed up. And I'm hoping that now I really want there to just be a floodgate opening of people naming names and calling people out and saying, hey, this is fucked up. This isn't right. These people are creeps.
Clean house.
Yes, please.
It's time.
I agree.
Tell me this. Are you a success?
I mean, I guess it depends on how you define success.
How do you define success?
You know, it's changed over the years for me as I get older. I mean, I do think there's this sense of, when I was in college, we had this thing, it's called, we call it the duck syndrome. When you're a student at Stanford, everything's very calm on the top of the water and you're sailing along, and then underneath your legs are paddling furiously. And I do think between social media, where we're kind of selling our best versions of our lives and we get to see what everyone else is doing, it's easy to be like, oh my God, all my friends are staffed on a series and I'm not. Oh my God, everyone's getting deals and I'm not. When the reality of it is, that's not necessarily the case. Everyone is struggling. I have friends who anyone would consider wildly successful in this business who still feel like they're failing, who are just empirically successful writers or successful people. So I think that for women especially, it's never just, I'm successful in my work. It's always, oh my God, what's going on in my personal life? What's going on in my family life? It's so many different things. And we've been sold this idea of having it all that is really not realistic unless you're an extremely wealthy person. So for where I'm at now, even if have days where I'm like, oh, I wish I was a staffed writer. Oh, my writing career is going nowhere. I think I love my day job. I have fun. I laugh every day that I'm at work. I'm married to a wonderful man who I can spend time with. We're not hurting for money. We both make livings.
What does he do?
He's a reality TV editor, and he's also a documentary editor, and he's an artist as well. He's a painter.
Great.
We both, we can pay our rents, and we can afford nice things, and we're very fortunate, all things considered. And I love my family, and I have great friends. And so to me right now, that's success. And planning on, we want to have a baby next year. So that's part of, to me, living a happy life is becoming more important than checking these boxes and then like, oh, what'll people think of me? The older I get, I realize I don't really give a shit about what people think about me.
Oh, and you're early on that plan. You're still in your 30s.
Yeah. So I've just kind of reached a point.
Good job.
Yeah, where I just don't give a shit. So I think as long as I'm happy, as long as I feel like I'm making good work and I'm doing creative stuff and, I have a day job that I think really helps people. Like, I think it's really important to help people get in touch with their sexuality. Or, when I help someone who's never had an orgasm before find a vibrator for the first time, or help someone...
I just changed her life.
Yeah, it's a big deal. All this stuff is really important. You're bringing pleasure and happiness into people's lives and helping couples get closer together. I feel like that's really positive work to be doing, as opposed to just... stamping widgets in a widget factory. No offense to widget makers.
God bless the widget makers.
Yes.
We need widgets.
No, we need widgets.
Whatever a widget is.
Whatever widget is. We need it. But I don't know. I feel like I'm in a really good place right now. And it took me a long time to get here. And it's been a weird journey. And there's still stuff that I want to do and accomplish in my life and in my career. But I don't know. I feel like at the end of the day, your relationships and how you feel and like whether you're smiling and laughing all day versus whether you just hate your life all day.
Something to be said for that.
Exactly. And even thinking back to the agents that I was working with at ICM who are making tons of money and who are very quote unquote successful, none of them looked happy. They didn't spend any time with their families. A lot of them didn't even have families. It just seemed like a really lonely, kind of toxic life. And it's like bad shit's gonna happen no matter what. It just will. Bad stuff happens all the time. So you just have to make the best of it and be with people that you love and value. And, I get to come home every day to my husband, and he's amazing, and we laugh all the time. So it's like, I feel like in that world of success, I feel like I'm successful. I wish I was more, I wish I made more money. I wish I had a staffing job.
But you're not going to wait until you're 70 to start being happy.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm trying to, be happy where I am and be working on what I want to work on and do what I want to do.
It's great.
Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to do.
Are you a badass?
I think so. I imagine I am.
Okay, what advice do you have for young people just starting to get into this business?
My advice would be, I do think it's a tough job, but if you want to learn how this business works, do 6 months in a mailroom. Do 6 months at an agency. It's a great 360 of how everything works and how all the aspects of the business work in tandem together. And it gives you a perspective that you otherwise wouldn't have.
And try not to be abused while you're there.
Yeah, and try not to be abused while you're there, but just be bold and you don't have to be apologetic. Just be yourself and do what you think is right and do the best work that you can do. There's a lot of people who just aren't willing at the end of the day to put in the work. And we'll do so much work to avoid doing the work, but just do the work. Just do the job.
Doing the work will set you apart.
Exactly. And meet people and make friends. And just don't be an asshole. You would be amazed at what just being the basic level of human decency, how far that can get you. Just be a good person.
That's the advice. That's the tweetable. Just don't be an asshole.
Yeah, just don't be a dick. It's not that hard.
That's great. Is there anything we didn't talk about that you wanted to talk about?
Well, if you want to follow the show, The web series is called Thank You Come Again. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. All of our handles are at TYCA Show. That's TYCA Show. You can follow us on social media. And we're running our Kickstarter, our Indiegogo campaign until November 12th. But if you're listening and you missed the November 12th cutoff and you have money you want to give us, contact us on social media.
They'll still take it.
Still take it. We will take it. And you can, if you're interested in sex toys or free sex ed, go to pleasurechest.com and come in and take a free class.
Or go into the Pleasure Chest and meet you.
Yeah, or come to the Pleasure Chest in West Hollywood and come say hi.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to The Other 50%, A Herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. I'd like to thank Chelsea Steiner for sharing her story. And special thanks to Kate McDougall for the editing, Jay Rowe, Danny Rosner, and Allison McQuaid for the music. Please find us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Podbay, and subscribe and leave a review. And of course on our website, theother50%.com, all spelled out, for added features, bios of our guests, and the merch. And now we're on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook and on Twitter at Other50% and Instagram at Other50% Podcast. Thanks for listening. See you next time.